SpikerMan was a thing I came up with when I was probably 6 or 7 years old. Um, I liked to draw when I was little, and I would draw just characters that I enjoyed. I tried to draw like Mario and Link, and as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, I was terrible at it. um, but I really liked Mega Man, and I remember what I was trying to do was I was trying to draw Mega Man, and I was not satisfied with how I was doing it. Um, but me drawing Mega Man, eventually, you know, I drew a poor Mega Man one day, and I thought to myself, wouldn't he look cooler with like wings or, and instead of shooting bullets, he shot like spiked things. And instead of Mega Man, I'll call him SpikerMan. And yeah, that's kind of where that started. Um, I drew a lot of other characters, and I tried to draw a lot of stuff that was similar to like just maps of Super Mario World, and I drew like the SpikerMan home village, and I drew the bad guys base and their evil hideout. And this is little bitty kid things, so a lot of the stories were that I wrote. I wrote like very poor man's comics of SpikerMan. Um, but yeah, a lot of those characters didn't survive this to this point. But I made them pretty much. The bad guy shows up and they fight. That was basically it. So in that time period, when I was growing up in the mid '90s, my brother showed me this program called Flash, and this was Flash like Windows 98 Flash. This was it was a really really old, like that probably the first version of Flash. I don't know, or it was Flash CS2, and when I got my hands on this, I made little dumb cartoons, and I made Spider-Man cartoons, and again, this was very basic. Of Spider-Man, is just there on his home planet. Bad guys show up, they fight. There wasn't really a arc or narrative or reason or anything like that. And to today, it's probably about the same thing. It's just there's a little bit more. There's a little bit more story. There's a little bit more complicated things going on. But yeah, Spiker-Man. Well, and people were like, "Well, what is Spiker-Man? Like, how does this? How does it all work?" Well, um, that's a tough question to answer, but it's kind of it's not really that complicated. Spiker-Man is a superhero, and there are lots of villains out there who are trying to do villain things. And when villains, try to take over a place or rob a the bank in space or whatever, he shows up and stops it. That's really about it. There's a lot of villains that want to take over the universe or the galaxy or sometimes blow up the galaxy, and he puts a stop to it. Um, yeah, so I'll go into some of the more details of it. One of the first cartoons I made about Spiker-Man was it was the Black Bloodtron, and this is the guy that has the vertical ear horns and the giant wings. And he's actually a mod of Evil Bomber from Bomberman Hero. And a lot of my characters are kind of like that. Chromatone was based off of Cell from Dragon Ball Z. Um, I think Scripender was a model of Darth Maul, but again, I changed a lot of things about him. I changed the fact that he wears an armor and he has a cape and he has the red face, but he doesn't have all the designs. He doesn't use the same kind of weaponry. But a lot of it kind of was like that because SpikerMan was a mod of Mega Man, and a lot of the fight scenes are Dragon Ball Z kind of inspired, and they're also a bit Star Wars inspired. Took a lot of inspirations from a lot of different things that I put together. Chromatone is like one of the main villains, and he is a lizard alien person thing, and he's probably the most recurring villain because he's very obsessive. He wants revenge for SpikerMan daring to defeat him once, and it's kind of this thing that this feud just keeps going on and on and on. But yeah, there are other characters that I decided to animate. One of them was Ixtana, which is a undead chromosome lizard that has white skin and a red streak on his face and on his chest, and yeah, he's crazy. He has this impossible smile, and he likes to kill anything and everything and laugh maniacally. And that's what makes him dangerous, is he's very unpredictable. Yeah, a lot of the cartoons, I can't make much sense of them because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just making stuff. But I can explain kind of a little bit. So what was going on was I took a lot of inspiration from Dragon Ball Z and the fact that it seems like there was always like a new transformation level. And so that's kind of why the SpikerMan characters, the good guys, look different in about every cartoon. Was I was having fun making a new look and a new version of them. So unless I pointed out, like, this is SpikerMan, and so is this, and so is this, and so is this, you wouldn't be able to tell because you wouldn't have the context of the cartoon. But also was the fact that other characters that were the Spikans could reach new levels in their armor, and their armor was biomechanical armor, which means it's not just a suit of armor. It's that the armor is kind of a living being that can connect to them. So that's why, in my imaginative brain, it was like, well, they're kind of alive as well. They kind of fight together as one. They can fight without armor, but they're not as strong. But a lot's changed since then. I've kind of dropped that because it sounds convoluted, and it probably kind of is. But that's why when they want to do the so-called fusions, is they can merge their bodies together. Like sometimes there are 4 characters that could just merge into one character, and they would have a very weird color palette because I was just having fun making different colors. So that's why sometimes SpikerMan is red and yellow and purple and whatever, yellow and brown and red, and it's like there's so many different versions and colors. And I was experimenting with color. I liked making them different colors because I was a kid. But yeah, that's why a lot of them look that way. The plot lines started to get a little bit better because I think that's something I kind of realized was there needs to be like an actual storyline going on here. So in high school, I wrote a bunch of stories, none of them which are canon really now. Some of them might be. But doing that allowed me to establish actual characters. There are some characters that I made back in the day and are still going to be made now. Scripender was a character that was kind of the Vegeta character, where he was the bad guy for a while, and in his case, he decided to switch sides because it was more beneficial for him. And SpikerMan was kind of undefeated, so it didn't make any sense to keep trying to fight him. And it's like SpikerMan kind of keeps him, at bay when it comes to actually taking over the universe. And he's like, I find it more fun. You'll see in the old cartoons that Scripender is there, Sarah is also there, another character, Kunak, is there. Kunak was the guy that, at the time, was the spotter. He was the guy that reported on, the power levels and saying the bad guy is now doing this, and he was watching from somewhere. I don't know how that works. But yeah, a lot of those characters, even back then, they existed. Kelver existed, but he was a very different character back then. Kelver was for a while he was the comic relief character. I know that seems odd, but that's how I had started out. But yeah, he eventually turned into the straight man character today. And there are other characters around that I kind of dropped, but some, not all of them. Slash was a character that was a villain for the longest time, and that was kind of an arc where Slash was a pretty powerful villain that kills Sarah in one storyline, and that was a mistake. Yeah, and then I did a storyline that was even more convoluted, where SpikerMan goes back in time to save her, because I realized that she didn't need to die yet. And she probably doesn't need to die ever, but I didn't know what I was doing. I was a kid, and I thought it was an interesting story thing to do, but I don't know. I didn't know what I was doing. I did a storyline with Scripender and his father, and that was one of the more darker storylines, because he kills him and then it kind of just ends, and it's like, that was dark. The fight was fun to animate. But yeah, and the one thing about these cartoons as well is that I did all the voices for them. And if you follow my channel any, you know that Hero Returns and Kulo Eclipso, the Zelda shows I did, have no voice acting. Well, these SpikerMan cartoons were before this, and I did voice acting for them. And I don't know exactly why I decided to choose that. I think it's because I knew that the voice acting wouldn't be very good. And I was probably right to make that call. So in those two series, there's just text. I think that worked better. But I was still learning to voice act, back then. I was not a voice actor. I was terrible at doing the voices. I was able to differentiate them a little bit, but you could just tell it was always me, because I didn't know how to do this. I didn't know what I was doing. But yeah, after a while, I stopped making SpikerMan cartoons, and I wouldn't say I stopped working on it entirely, but I did kind of put it on halt, because I knew that, what I was doing, I was not satisfied with. And I stopped to kind of give myself more time, say, well, one day I'll eventually hit that point where I can do this and I'll be satisfied and it'll be great. And then I think in between Hero Returns and Cool Eclipso, I made a short cartoon of SpikerMan called Khan, where Khan was a previous villain and he had brought a girl with her named Rosa. And this cartoon was okay, wasn't great. I kind of knew it was bad. But yeah, that was my retry of being like, well, let's try this again. Maybe I'm there now. And it was like, no. And then the cartoon after that was SpikerMan versus Slash. And Slash, I brought him back for SpikerMan to fight again. And I like that cartoon better, but it was like, I'm just not quite there yet. So that's why that one kind of died. And as far as we go right now, I have been trying to do a lot of things. I'm doing a new animated series right now called SpikerMan: The Gold Skull Supremacy. I'm having fun with it. As far as animating it and stuff like that, I'm not that satisfied with it, of course. I'm just too picky, I guess. But I have worked on a manuscript for a book, and right now it is just a manuscript. I have worked on some other projects, and right now I'm just trying to gather artwork to show to someone. You know, I hope that one day I can get this to be an actual thing that's like official and an actual thing out in the public. But for now, it's very private and it's very, closed down to just YouTube and my websites. And it's not that popular. It's not very famous. It's not nothing really right now. The way that SpikerMan works is that he is, in the beginning of the story, he is a kid, and he's a very eager kid. He wants to be like his father and his grandfather that he looks up to. But yeah, he's still kind of inexperienced with fighting villains. A lot of the first things he does are kind of just skirmishes. They're not really that complicated. It's just, hey, this person is trespassing on our territory, and deal with them. And he does. And they live on a planet that they had to relocate to. And they basically kind of bullied out, people that lived on that planet before. It was bad guys that took command of the planet. There was not many people there, but they turned into their home world. Yeah, eventually, SpikerMan's dad builds a space station, and it becomes kind of a superhero hotline deal where people call them for help on their planet, and they send a few people to take care of the situation. Whether it is pirates, whether it is a takeover, whether it is just a bad guy, running amok, whether it's a natural disaster, a meteorite about to hit their planet, whatever it is, So yeah, I know a lot of people are kind of like, what's the story, this? And I'm kind of like, well, the story is he is a superhero that once he gets a call that something is going wrong, he resolves it. He's a very busy guy, and the story is that there are multiple mini stories that, like a TV show, every new episode is there's a new thing that's wrong, and we got to go fix it. And there's a lot of villains that are recurring, like Bloodtron and Chromatone and Ixtana and Vorta and the Gold Skull Supremacy. There's just a lot of things going on at once that heroes are called to resolve something, and they will pick and choose. Like you and you and you go here, and like you go fix this other thing over here. That's kind of the story line of it is. They're superheroes. Not that different from like the Justice League or Avengers, where just stuff happens. Like a new thing will just show up, and it's like, well, somebody's got to handle it. Somebody's got to take care of it. So we go. Um, I think that's fine. It's not that different from, like I said, um, other superheroes where there are branching arcs sometimes. For SpikerMan, I don't have a whole lot. Like right now, is the Gold Skull Supremacy is an arc. The Wrath of Chromatone was an arc where Chromatone was trying to build a bomb that blows up the galaxy because he's very angry. He's nuts. It's like, I know everybody has kind of been like, well, why would he do that? And it's like, well, he can survive, for one thing. It don't matter to him. And the other thing is his thinking at this point, because I kind of left the hints of like, he's been trying to defeat SpikerMan for a long time. Nothing has worked. So he's kind of at the point where he's like, don't care. I'm going to blow up the galaxy with him in it, everybody else in it. I'm like, this will work, Like that's his thinking of it. Is he's a bad guy. He's nuts. He just wants to get rid of everybody. So, the Gold Skull Supremacy is a thing where the supremacy right now is trying to take over a galaxy that's close to them, and they've been getting calls to be like, hey, this is happening. And so right now they're kind of answering the call, being like, this organization is trying to take over the galaxy. We ain't going to have that. And they've already taken over 2 other galaxies. We're not having that either. So, that's kind of the situation with that. Like I would consider that to be a arc, technically. But I have, one of my favorite arcs is something I've kind of written about already on my DeviantArt page, was the first Chromosome Wars, where Lord Omni has taken over the chromosomes, and the chromatone is part of that family of this alien lizard race that kind of does want to take over the galaxy at some point. Omni has kind of just jumped in and declared himself the leader, and is using them to, and to clarify. When I say chromosome family, the alien lizard race of chromosomes, I'm talking about like billions of lizard people that are sometimes just maniacal monsters. So this kind of happens in the galaxy, and SpikerMan at this time is a young kid, like a teenager. So are the other characters, like the main characters. And there's separate kind of stories going on with SpikerMan and his friends, while there's another kind of arc going on with Kelver. And they all kind of meet to this one planet, Planet Monsoon, and a lot of different things happen here. But the main part of it is that Planet Monsoon is kind of in the middle, and the way that this kind of war will work is that you go from planet to planet and try to advance to the rest of the galaxy. But Planet Monsoon is the center point. It's not that different from like the Battle of the Bulge, where factions are trying to gain control of the middle. So it's one of the biggest arcs because, for one thing, this is where a lot of characters meet each other. The other is that they fight against Lord Omni, who I have declared as the most powerful villain in the universe. And they find that out, and it's not pretty. But it's an arc we'll probably get to at some point, don't worry. But yeah, it is sadly, if you want something a little bit more complicated than that, I mean, Kelver probably has the more complicated of the stories. He is the straight man, like I said, and there's a lot of different stories about him that starting out his training in his childhood, where he's put on a different planet by himself and has to survive for about a year. Um, there's a lot of tension between him and his father. His father doesn't like him very much. Calvert tries to prove himself, to everybody that he's actually, not a bad, fighter. And he kind of fails at that. That's one of his like repetitive things, is that he tries and he fails a lot, and that's okay. But he's a kid. Um, yeah, so he is kind of looked down upon a lot, and he just gets the most bad luck, really, of most of the characters. But then there's times where it's like something good happens, and he's like, "Hey," and then it kind of goes wrong. It goes like 3 times worse after that, and it's like, oh well. Yeah, not all the arcs are just fighting. Keller, for example, there's a storyline that I made that I really like, where he loses his superhero license, and he's kind of like, well, what am I going to do now? Because the space government won't let me actually be a superhero anymore. Now he's allowed to go with certain missions as a guest, not allowed to do a whole lot there, but that's kind of a way around it. Like, well, we'll when we come back to report what he did, it's like, not much. He probably saves the whole day, but like he's the one that did most of the work. But there's an arc I came up with where he becomes a chef, and it's a thing of like Sarah is like, why don't he's always kind of down and glum, and she's like, why don't you come with me to a cooking class? And he's like, man, I don't want to. And she's like, come on. And he's like, okay, fine. And so they go to a cooking class, and he's kind of there against his will. That's how he sees it. But yeah, he kind of discovers that he's not that bad at cooking, and so he spends like a few months learning to cook. And by the end of that, he is a master chef. And there's no fighting bad guys in this storyline. It is just seeing him go from not liking to cook to being a master chef and opening his own restaurant. In the superhero space station, there was a restaurant that's not very good. He takes it over because people were lining up at his door for food instead of the restaurant, which is like not that far away. And the board, the superhero board of directors, makes a decision to hire him as the new chef. He makes a lot of money, and it's a thing that's like, well, there's no fighting here, but I kind of enjoy character building like that, where he was at one point, now he's somewhere else, and it's like, all right, yeah. But there are storylines like that are not all about fighting villains. They're not all about superheroing. But yeah, I hope I have clarified some of that a little bit. So what's next for SpikerMan? I don't actually know. I'm going to try to see what I can do to get this to be the official stuff, where an actual movie, an actual television show. I don't know, but I'm pretty old now. That's kind of my dream deal, is I'm going to try to talk to some people and see what we can do, and hopefully we can do something, because that would be kind of cool. Anyway, thank you for watching. This has been the History of SpikerMan.